Welcome along. Today we are in our stress and overwhelm month, and today we're talking to Tanya Stricek. Tanya, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, Emily. First of all, thank you so much for having me on here. I'm quite excited. It's nice to chat with you again. Emily, you're so infectious. Your laughter is lovely. So yes, my name is Tanya and I live in Toronto, Canada. I am a mindful eating and holistic women's health coach. I'm also a dental hygienist. I can almost describe what I'm not, because I've been in healthcare for 24 years. I'm a dental hygienist, a tobacco educator. I teach other health professionals motivational interviewing. I really have a whole passion for health, but especially women. I saw so many women in my dental chair suffering with menopausal symptoms. So this has really become my jam.
Awesome. So today we're going to talk about stress and overwhelm. Let's start at the beginning. What does it mean? How does it manifest?
That's a great question. And in fact, just for fun, I decided to Google the dictionary definition of overwhelm, which is to bury or drown beneath a huge mass. So what does that say? What does that say to us? But I think when you dig deeper, you can feel that. Overwhelm does feel like we can be buried by all of these things, too much coming at us. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. And when you said the dictionary definition, I felt myself just go, oh.
Yes, someone posted one of those little animated Giphies on Facebook of Homer Simpson. Over here we have The Simpsons. I don't know how popular The Simpsons are, and it's just like drowning in a bush. But that's how we feel. And it can feel like so many things are coming at us. That's where cliches, I think, come from. You know, the straw that broke the camel's back, the icing on the cake. And it's really something that shows up as intense emotions to smaller things. An emotion that's very high, no matter the emotion, it can be a level of emotion that's very high, and we can overreact when we feel overwhelmed.
And obviously, as we come into December and there's all the Christmas stuff around the place, it's even more likely to start feeling like that, isn't it?
I agree. And I think we love to talk about the joy of the season, but I don't think we talk enough about the stress and even the loneliness of the season, which can be very, very overwhelming. And overwhelm is a feeling, but it leads to stress in the body. And managing our stress is really foundational for hormone balance and overall well-being.
Absolutely. And I know from personal experience of being in a job that I found incredibly stressful and still trying to train and still trying to be all things to all people, when overwhelm hits, wow. It's horrific.
Yes, you actually said something right there, be all things to all people. That is, I do have some tips for managing overwhelm, and that's going to be in there, because that is, I think it's a woman thing. I don't think it's as much as a man thing. We're not discussing this with men. Men certainly feel overwhelmed for different reasons, but we still feel pressure. And I think this age has a lot of pressure to be all things to all people.
Absolutely. And I think it is very difficult, because a lot of women reach this age when they're still raising younger children, or they're caring for elderly parents, or both, and trying to work and trying to be a wife. And already, before we get started on anything external, that's too much.
I totally agree. And I can certainly relate to that. Part of my story is that when my daughter was 18 months, my partner committed suicide. And I had lots of well-meaning advice at that time, but we really need to understand and own our own overwhelm, which is hard when you're in overwhelm and when you're stressed, because you're not sleeping, you're eating like crap, because you just need to feel good. We search for ways to feel good. But at the time, I needed to understand my own story, and rather than buffer everybody's well-meaning advice, and understand how you can take care of your own self with your own unique circumstances.
Absolutely. So moving on from that, what are your hints and tips for people to, I suppose, first to acknowledge that this is happening and then to work their way through?
Definitely, definitely. And I think we know when we're overwhelmed. I think sometimes we have trouble identifying that. I mean, as we mentioned, our day-to-day modern life, we all experience overwhelm. Mom life, grandmother life, kids, work, sandwiched. And I took care of my mother while I was taking care of a daughter, which was like mind-blowing at the time, but it leads to this stress. Like we can see this emotional lack of focus. We feel like we get down on ourselves. We feel like we're doing nothing right. So these negative thought processes happen, and we can really shut down. And so it's interesting. If you don't mind, I was going to share some tips from mentalhealth.org,
Yeah.
mentalhealth.org UK, because I was curious. Like I can say what I think overwhelm is, but this was a neat, oh, that's nice. I'm sorry. I have a dingy on my computer. I apologize. So one of the top things for overwhelm, one of them actually was messaging. Having too many messages. It wasn't the top, but it was a biggie. Having too many messages on your phone or your computer actually creates a huge set of anxious feelings, because work imposes on us. People impose on us. Did you get my message? Did you get, like, it's stressful. I don't know how. I have an 18-year-old, and I'm actually being serious here. She has executive function issues. I don't know how they cope. But in this survey, 46% of people reported that they ate too much due to stress. 29, I know, and we women, because I think we don't talk about it enough, we carry it all, and we're supposed to be like, right? Superhero people, we don't talk about it enough, so we eat our feelings. Totally with you. 29% said they actually started drinking more, and 16% increased smoking or even started smoking, which is huge, right? We're looking for these coping mechanisms to get these feel-good transmitters going in our brain. But the number one thing that people stressed about was health, which is not surprising. It's not surprising. If we're over 55, the numbers go from 36 to 44. Things like debt. And the third was responding immediately to messages and comparing ourselves. This was also huge in the young category of 18 to 24-year-olds, which it's my belief that we build our menopause early on. What we're doing with our minds and our bodies early affects how we are today. Comparison and body appearance comparison really added to a lot of stress, pressure to succeed, and even shelter, which is sad, right?
Really? Mm.
Sad. And so when I think of, yes, sorry, go ahead.
All of those things, and this makes perfect sense to me, all of those things are out of our control, aren't they? And really, that's when things become stressful. So you can be dealing with any number of things that, if they're within your control, if you've got all the plates spinning and you're happy with that, it's not stressful. Add something that just is out of control, whole thing falls down.
Yes, your cake gets iced, right? And is it vanilla or chocolate?
Eat it.
Yeah. Yes. And when we think about other things, when we talk about out of our control, because that's an interesting point that you brought up, relationships, the holiday season, we're going to have to face people we possibly are triggered by because they're family, and those family relationships trigger out of control feelings of overwhelm. Work has to still be juggled through the holiday season, and the task list mounts. We take on so many tasks to be perfect sometimes through the holiday season. And then things like grief, lack of support. I mean, we could even relate that to the woman who has to do all the Christmas preparations. Lack of support, loneliness, and then the negative statements. You know, I think you pretty much said it too, like being able to discern whether or not things are in our control or out of our control. And actually writing that down when you're feeling overwhelmed can be a huge weight off the brain and shoulders.
Totally. And such a simple exercise, and so easy to do, but gives you that boundary really with, can I control this? Okay, no, I can't. I have to just find a way to let it go.
And there's the key. Can we let it go?
Well, that, yes, I say it just so simply and blithely.
Yes. No, but I mean, that's where, as you know, being a mindful eating coach, mindfulness can really help us with that process, because we can really attach to the overwhelming thoughts. And from my experience as an anxious individual, thinking too far ahead, what's going to happen, holy moly, right? And then we think behind, like, well, the last time this happened, the last time I did a report for my boss, he hated it. He always hates me. I'm not as good as Emily. Oh, why did I take this job? Like, we go down that road on top of all the other things. And so we just feel like flat out, right? Flat out. So when it comes to work, we can delegate. I think a lot of us, I don't know if you would agree, Emily, do women have a hard time delegating at home?
I think
And
so,
even
yeah.
at work? Yes. Yes. And so I think we have to get used to certain things, you know, things like delegation, wearing all the hats as a woman, a mom, an employee, a business owner. Sometimes it doesn't seem possible. I know I felt that when my daughter was very, very young. Like, people would say, well, find somebody to clean your house. I'd be like, somebody might need to pay for that. But it's really, again, coming to the root of your own overwhelm, and also understanding that maybe there's things we have to say no to. And understanding what's really happening when you lose your car keys and that's the last straw, and you're walking around going, oh my gosh, I'm such an idiot. How could I lose that? It really isn't that you're an idiot or that you have a menopausal brain or you have a cognitive issue. Maybe you're actually stressed. And in that moment, your cortisol is pumping. It affects your blood sugar. So many things happen to us with the stress. So we can talk about what to do when it comes to stress, if you like.
Yes.
So certainly adopting a more mindful attitude can help. The father of mindfulness, John Kabat-Zinn, says that mindfulness is really just a way of waking up and living in harmony with yourself and the world. And it sounds lovely, doesn't it? Wouldn't we all love to wake up and live in harmony with the world? Sure, we would. But really, the bottom of that is that using mindfulness, trying to reel yourself into where you are right now and not judging yourself, can help you become aware of all the things that are feeding that. And it helps you just kind of question where you are in the world and this belief system that you have that may or may not be even really true. It's really about conscious living. Mindful eating is about conscious eating. Mindfulness can help with just conscious living in the moment without driving too far forward. Handling overwhelm really is about handling your stress response too. And when you said let go, when we use mindfulness, and one of the coping strategies is tied to mindfulness, and that's breathing. Have you heard how breathing helps calm your nervous system? I'm sure you have. Yeah.
But explain more, because it's always useful to know, to have some techniques available, you know.
Yes, and something really simple. There's all kinds of vagus breathing techniques out there, but something really simple, if you're at work or in the car or in the grocery store lineup. I think people think mindfulness is that I've got to go home and meditate, right? And that was what was told to me. Oh, you know what? You really need to meditate. I'm like, dude, I'm a single mom. I had this thing that I had to go sit for half an hour instead of work, instead of do the laundry, instead of feed my baby and take care of my mother, like, hello, and just right? No. So you can be in the grocery store lineup and you can do a box breath. You can just breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. And it's just a visual cue, and it pulls you right back to something to focus on besides your thoughts. And breathing for me was actually my first item that I adopted for mindfulness, because I could wrap my head around it. It was so simple. Once it clicked, I was like, it's so simple. So I can do that between patients and feel a little more calm.
Yeah. And it's not requiring half an hour out of your day. It's not requiring specialist equipment. It's just, yeah.
Yes.
Perfect.
Not that meditation and spending time in meditation isn't wonderful, and it does a lot for the self-regulation of the brain. In the mindfulness-based eating awareness training that I took, it's one of the only trainings that incorporates teaching meditation to others. But when you just tell people, like, it's easy, go meditate, you don't have to make it hard, that can be hard. So that simple box, that simple square, you can take that and just breathe. And that actually physically gets the brain to thinking, okay, I'm supposed to relax now, and it changes the chemistry of the body. It transmits a signal through this nerve called the vagus nerve that actually helps your gut, because your gut, when it's stressed, isn't going to absorb nutrients. We need our nutrients. We need our foundation of nourishment to handle stress. Like it's all just a little lovely spider web, right?
Awesome. So once we get the breathing calming down, what other sort of hints and tips, certainly coming up to sort of Christmas and stuff, when people are just looking at this huge amount of things they've got to do, and there is going to be that family member who's going to just, you know, pick at them, or on the other side, they're just dreading the fact of the whole period alone, and just so that in itself is overwhelming. This sort of whole period stretching ahead of you. What other little sort of hints and tips do you have that we can incorporate just to help calm it all down?
Really, the hardest things is saying no. Saying no, because if we say yes to one thing, we say no to something else that might feed our souls and keep us calmer. And that can come with the overscheduling at this time of year. I always question, and this is going to make me sound like a bit of a Scrooge, but we have 365 days of the year to love on each other and have dinner. So this pressure I feel where I am to like, oh, it's the holidays, we need to go out. Overscheduling, maybe understanding that when you schedule something, give yourself a buffer, because it usually takes a little bit longer than we think to get the shopping done, to park the car, to write that report. Give yourself a buffer. And if you have that extra time, can you imagine the space you'll feel, the breathing space you'll feel? And then with that whole saying no, a lot of our overwhelm comes with taking all the things on and not setting boundaries. And that is a very, very difficult thing when it comes to family. I think we feel we have to let all the family in all the time, but we are allowed to, I'm going to help you from 1 o'clock to 2, and then I have an appointment. Who knows what the appointment is? Maybe it's with the couch to read a book, but defining your boundaries so that you can say no and get what you need.
And actually what you say there is it's a really good stepping stone to being able to outright say no, is creating fictional appointments. You know,
Sure.
I can be with you until X time, and then I have to be somewhere. No one needs to know where somewhere is. No one needs to know the full details of why you need to leave then, do they? But it gives you the space to say no, and if you're not comfortable saying no, it's a nice way to start getting in there, isn't it?
Definitely. And when you start to carve some space for yourself and you start to breathe and you get some boundaries, things come up. Sometimes we can be a little afraid to actually look at, why do I feel uncomfortable around this person? And they can be difficult to face. Maybe that person has difficult conversations with you. How can you mitigate that? Can you learn how to have a difficult conversation? Or maybe with this space, can you just actually be quiet with yourself? This is another hard concept for a lot of us because we're doers. But when we are tuning out all the noise, it's a good calming for the nervous system. And you don't have to be quiet and stare at a corner. It's sunny outside where I am. I can go walk in the park. I can lay in the bathtub. And maybe my quiet is going to the gym and not talking to anybody. It's whatever that is for you. And sometimes unitasking instead of multitasking. Can you do one thing at a time? Can we?
Can we?
Ask yourself that. You know, to the journaling, like what's in your control, what's not in your control. When something's in your control, you can ask whether or not, are there options? Are there options for me? And what options are there? And one of those options could be developing your support mechanisms. And maybe your support mechanisms are, again, in little columns, like your professional support. Do you have a mental health counselor that you need? Do you have a psychologist you talk to? Your doctor? Do you have a friend who can listen to you without saying anything, without telling you what to do, giving you advice, telling you you're crazy, how lucky you are to live the life? You know what I mean? That kind of person. What about a support as far as a yoga that you go to? You know what I mean, but putting in some web of support so you have little things to go to when you feel that overwhelm.
Something I've observed in speaking to the ladies in the group and in recording these webinars, perimenopause seems to be a really good time for us to address all of this. So we've hurtled through life until now, and suddenly our hormones and our energy levels and everything are changing and making us have to stop and take stock of what's what. And so the hints and tips you've given are really useful, because if a woman's got to this point and actually she's been perfectly okay being all things to all people until now, but suddenly there isn't the energy for that, there isn't the, to be honest, she just can't be asked anymore, for want of a better phrase. And actually, rather than blame our hormones, we can enhance our hormones, we can really use them for our benefit and say, right, well, things are changing. Here are my new boundaries. I'm not 20 anymore, so my boundaries are different. I think we can, if we take the positive from the perimenopause and the menopause, we can just pull such a lot of great stuff to make the rest of life epic rather than be stuck.
Definitely. Yes, definitely. And again, you said some interesting things. With the perimenopausal time and our hormones changing, our physiology is changing. And we do feel, because of chemistry changes, more depression, anxiety, etc. And what's happening to us, like we cognitively also think, my gosh, what's happening in this time of my life? But when we nourish ourselves as best we can with good food, we're setting ourselves up for physical processes. Blood sugar drops and changes, stress the body. Gut imbalances stress the body. Our serotonin, our feel-good hormone, is made in the gut. So when we're not taking care of that, and I'm not, you know where I stand as far as this restriction mentality, Emily, but we all can't argue that we do need to eat our vegetables, we do need to sleep and drink water, and not beat ourselves up for the person that we are, right?
Pretty much.
Right. So there's so many of these things in the perimenopausal time that we can do to...
Sorry, a huge lorry just went past. And I live down a tiny country lane, so that was a little bit strange.
So you're a little surprised. Okay, if you get overwhelmed, stop. But there's things we can do, but sometimes in this time, it's overwhelming. So I invite people to think about their first step. What is one thing you can do? What is your first step? What's the minimal you can do? If you can journal for 3 minutes and that's all you can do, bravo. Yeah, exactly. If you can walk for 5 on your lunch rather than be stuck listening to a coworker talking about whatever it is that stresses you out, bravo. What's the minimal you can do in this time? Take little chunks of it. And if you feel that you are stuck, there are many professionals that can help you get unstuck.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm going to thank you for your time now, because I think we've got so much more that we've covered in that we need to cover in future webinars. But rather than keep talking for weeks and getting everybody offside, I think we'll draw that one to a close now, but we'll explore different aspects of what we've talked about in the months to come. So Tanya, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure talking to you, Emily.
Thank you, Tanya.
Take care.